Hi, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Webinar Wednesdays with US Lacrosse. My name is TJ Buchanan, and I'm the Technical Director for Athlete Development at US Lacrosse. And we're very pleased to be able to present tonight's webinar to you entitled A Culture of Heart, Creating a Powerful and Positive Team Culture. We believe this is very, very important in terms of the development and the holistic development of athletes, because when we look at the holistic athlete development package, there's really 4 areas that need to be addressed in order to really give every athlete the best chance of reaching their full potential. There's the technical skills, and in lacrosse terms, right, that's the catch, throw, scoop, shoot, dodge, those kind of things. Then there's the tactical skills. It's the X's and O's of the game. What man up, what man down, what offense, defense do you run, those pieces of the puzzle. And then we have the psychosocial skills, right? That's really what's going on in the kids or the athlete's brain and how they're feeling about their experience. And obviously tonight's webinar about building a positive team culture, really fits into that, because if the kid is not in a great environment and it's a toxic team culture or a less than ideal one, obviously, the technical and the tactical are going to start to fall by the wayside, and they're not really going to enjoy their experience. And then the last piece of this is the physical skills, right? Being able to move, being able to run, being able to compete, being able to hold your own, in terms of the physicality of our games or the physical elements of it. So again, just to reiterate, right, tonight we're really focusing on that blue square that you see on your screen at this time. Sorry, I forgot to share my screen. So that blue square that you see on your screen at this time, and that's what Bobby's going to really get into some great things about. So before I introduce Bobby formally and turn it over to him, just a couple of quick housekeeping items for this evening's webinar. Number one, this session is being recorded, and by registering for the event, you will automatically receive in about 24 hours or so a recording to your inbox. You don't have to do anything other than click on the link if you want to view this again. The link is completely shareable, so if you have some friends, family, assistant coaches, whatever that you feel would benefit from this and you want them to hear that message, we encourage you to certainly share that around. Also, throughout the webinar, we are not able to hear you. Your microphones have been muted upon entering. So if you do have a question, on the control panel that pops up on your screen when you logged in and we went live here, there's a little button over there where you can submit questions. Please put them in through that questions pane, and then at the end of the webinar, I'll do a little bit of moderating and we can ask Bobby those questions and he'll give some responses to us, right? And then the final, I guess, housekeeping item is, I hate to be that guy, but if you appreciate the webinars that we're doing and the content that we're providing out to you, at no charge, whether you're a US Lacrosse member or not, we certainly encourage you to visit the uslacrosse.org webpage and click on the donate button. And whatever you feel this session was worth, we certainly encourage you to make a donation to the organization so we can continue to provide great content like this, at absolutely no cost to our users. So with all that being said, I'm going to introduce Bobby. So Bobby Audley is a nationally recognized team building and group dynamics facilitator and speaker that is able to bring a group in through his warmth, humility, and tremendous ability to connect to life. Bobby began his career working in higher education as a leadership specialist. After his time as an NCAA lacrosse player, Bobby spent time coaching lacrosse at the national junior college level and spent 3 years working for Project Ascent, specializing in team development. Bobby also has spent 3 years as the founder of Outside the Zone, a leadership speaking company, before joining the Penno Training Group in 2015. Bobby was twice featured on the TEDx stage, speaking on growth through difficulty and how to build meaningful connections with others. You can see on the screen there some of those high bullet points, and some of you may have seen Bobby's talk on, I believe it was 50 cups of coffee, about how he was going to connect with others and learn from their experiences and some great things along that. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to hop on YouTube and look it up. It's a fantastic segment, and I'm certain that you'll enjoy it and be able to grow personally and professionally through it. So with all that being said, if you give me just a second, I'm going to turn over the controls to Bobby, and he's going to take it from here. So Bobby, welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this evening. And on behalf of everybody at US Lacrosse and all of the folks that are on this webinar, we certainly appreciate you and all that you're doing to make the world a better place and helping to develop leaders and more positive team environments.
Hey, thank you, TJ. I appreciate that introduction. I appreciate, here we show my screen. Let's flip. Is that working? Awesome. I appreciate the introduction. Thank you to US Lacrosse as well for the opportunity to present not just this webinar, but a whole series of 3 webinars related to the topic of creating a positive and powerful team culture, as TJ shared to kick this off. Obviously, I'm a firm believer in the culture aspect of team sports and excited to be able to talk about it over the next few weeks here. In this session, particularly, my goal is to define what it means to be a team and give you the tools for setting a foundation for what we call a positive and powerful team culture starting on day 1. So again, my goals for the entire webinar series are, number 1, let's define team. What does it mean? Let's provide tools for creating a culture in the second webinar, and then in the third webinar, provide tools for sustaining and maintaining that culture over years and years and years of your team, of your organization, of whatever it might be. Now, having done this type of work for many years, I've come to appreciate and understand that no one will hear you until they know you. TJ gave an introduction of me that I appreciate. I don't usually highlight these aspects, but since this is US Lacrosse, I do want to kind of make mention that I have played the sport, I coached the sport. I grew up just outside of Syracuse, New York, and lacrosse is obviously a big part of my life growing up there. I played at Liverpool High School, played for the Roadhawks Club Lacrosse program, which in the early days when we started as rising sophomores, and we were one of the only programs in the area, and we only had 3 teams in the entire program. So obviously the club scene is much different today. After high school, I played a season at Mercyhurst University, transferred to Salisbury, and played 3 years of NCL club lacrosse there. After college, I was an assistant coach for Hartford Community College men's team in Maryland. And while at HCC, I also worked as a student leadership and orientation specialist, which was mentioned in my intro bio. And currently, I am the head middle school boys coach at the Murray School in Washington, D.C. I just started there a few weeks ago as a way to get back into the sport and coach in a way that suits my schedule. And coaching middle school is just very fulfilling and rewarding for me right now. Professionally, I know TJ hit the highlights, but I like to say, you know, in the world of speaking and training, I've been doing it now for 8 years. I've been twice on the TEDx stage. Back in 2015, 2016, I was a finalist for Speaker of the Year, and I'm a lead facilitator with an organization called the Pinot Training Group. Since 2008, this particular group has served over 500,000 people, 650 plus teams, and last year alone, we served 80,000 people. I joined Pinot Training Group 3 years ago for the sole purpose of bringing their work in team culture to athletic teams. They had not yet worked with athletes, and in the last 3 years, we brought our work to teams at schools listed below, plus more. And last year, again, this isn't a shameless plug. This is to lend some credibility to why we're talking about team culture here. Last year, after working with Northwestern women's soccer, their head coach had this to say after our time with them. And I got an email from one of their captains that said, "I can truly say this is the closest, most vulnerable, and most positive team I've ever been a part of." So I know I run the risk of sounding self-promoting by starting a webinar this way. But again, I mean, this is a 3-part series. If you're committing to being with me for this month, for 3 total hours, for 3 weeks in a row, I honor that commitment. And I want you to know that we as an organization know what we're doing. What I'm about to share, I've learned in 8 years of research. I've experienced playing and coaching. I've experienced facilitating and training with high-level teams and reflecting on my own experiences, growing up playing all sports, and in this case, playing lacrosse and coaching lacrosse. And much of what I'm about to share too has come from Ryan Pinot, the name on the marquee of the organization. He himself has 16 years of experience building cultures with teams in all industries, not just sports. And he and I, together with a co-author, Brandon Johnson, wrote a series of booklets on team culture. And much of this webinar and the webinars to come from those booklets. One in particular called Teams Are Earned is what this particular webinar is based off of. And I'll talk about that at the end if there's interest in that. It's not an upsell for us. We share our content, our businesses, our trainings, and so we share as much as we can. So with that, let's dive in. As I said, one of my main goals with this particular webinar is to define what is a team. What does it mean to be a team? And in a recent training, we arrived at this question and of what is a team, because I got the sense from the group that I was with that they didn't really define it. And the answer back reflected that. It was a pretty typical answer, that a team is a group of individuals working together to achieve the same goal. And if you Google the Webster's definition of a team, this is pretty spot on. And this would be true if we all lived in a vacuum without social dynamics, humanity, social context, and life. This definition would be completely acceptable if that were the case. But we know that the best teams are not just groups of individuals that work together. A team is intentionally built. A team is a group of people that are unified, invested, engaged, and hungry. In our team trainings, we teach that the title of team is earned. We literally start every training at 8 a.m. as a class. The words class are posted on the wall under our heart banner. And I know many athletes look at this as hokey or cliche, especially at 8 in the morning, staring down a 12-hour day of training. But we explain you must earn the status of team by the end of the day. And you as a group of individuals will decide what it means to be a team. What are your standards? What does extraordinary effort look like versus a good enough kind of mailing it in effort? What does fully engaged versus going through the motions look like? And the standard you set will define your potential outcomes, not your guaranteed outcomes, your potential outcomes. Sports, like life, doesn't have many guarantees, but we have potential based on what we set up are our standards. So we explain that. It's not calling a team out. It's simply saying, you must earn by the end of the day what it means to be a team. And after you earn it today, earn it again tomorrow and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. This picture here is a team that earned it. You can see them holding up their sign. There's some heart and passion there when we set a standard and we go for it and we earn it. When we tell our teams that the right to call yourself a team must be earned, you're acknowledging that there are some things that a team is not. And like I said, it's not merely a group of individuals who share a team name or just happen to play the same sport or practice together. It's not people that just have a common goal. You're not a team because you were simply recruited to that school and accepted. And I think if we think athletically or even in our professional environment, so many of us come into jobs and people say, welcome to the team, and they don't know us yet. They don't know our name even, but we're just day one, we're thrown into this, what is supposedly this high and mighty team that we hold up. So you're not a team simply because you spend a lot of time together or practice, play, and perform together. I truly believe, like from the get-go, we must accept that a team is earned. And if you do not set up standards or non-negotiables, you're not a team. If you avoid tough conversations, if you accept good enough efforts, if you let people settle for less than they're capable of, we must establish from day one that this is not representative of what a team looks like. So we know what a team isn't. What is a team? A team grows individuals on it. It raises each player to a higher standard. A team embraces accountability. And that means a team looks to a teammate through the eyes of, I know you have more to give. I'm here to help you get there. A team allows accountability because trust is established. Openness is created. Honesty is accepted. A team plays all its cards. A team yearns for feedback from peers. A team sacrifices personal comfort and attitudes for the betterment of the whole and the collective goal. A team embraces the gauntlet and does whatever is necessary for each member to survive that gauntlet. And when each individual takes personal responsibility for the problems of all, that's a team. That's a champion level team type stuff. And so my goal for this webinar is to get you to truly think about how you want to define your team and give you the tools to achieve that champion level team status for whatever champion means to you, whatever champion is to you. As it goes for any webinar like this, it might sound like an easy fix, and I want to be clear that it is not. This is not an easy fix. This is not a 10 steps and follow these 10 steps and everything will just fall into place. If it were easy, everyone would do it. Everything I'm going to share over the course of this webinar and the next two will be work to implement. And I encourage you to put in the work. My pitch right now, before we get into what that is whether you put in the work or not, your choices have rewards and they have consequences. If you want to be a good enough team, just a group of people, if as I'm reading this, you're thinking, you know what, like I'm fine with just a group of people that just shows up together, there are rewards for that. There's a reason that exists. Those rewards are comfort, lack of responsibility, disassociation from attitudes of others, apathy, less work, it's easier, and there's consequences to that. There's lack of trust, there's lack of transparency, gossip exists, drama exists, frustration exists, and ultimately toxicity takes over those types of teams. And it's when that happens that some people that aren't bought in start to buy in, because they start to say there's got to be a solution to this. And the solution is when you commit to the work of being a team as we've defined it thus far. There's consequences to that too. There's sacrifice, there's discomfort, there's vulnerability, there's risk, but there's also rewards. Those rewards are less drama. Those rewards are more solutions. Those rewards are the discomfort goes away over time. You start to be comfortable in the discomfort. There's camaraderie. You're allowed to be yourself as an individual. The second part of this theory is, or this series, is energies, everything about how you show up, and that is created in a positive team environment. Trust is created, and ultimately more opportunities than when we settle for good enough. I don't think there's a lot of teams out there with terrible, toxic, awful cultures. I think there's a lot of team out there with good enough cultures. It's okay. It's not that bad. I work with a lot of teams that'll say that. I make this pitch at the beginning of our day, and teams, especially with success, with a lot of wins on their resume or a historically legacy of success, will say, we're fine, we're okay, we're good with good enough, because the wins are allowing that to be the case. And maybe they still have lack of trust, they still have lack of transparency, they still have the toxicity that exists, but it's okay and it's good enough because of wins. But if we are to argue that sports is so much more than wins and losses at the end of the day, then when do we start to decide, like, let's define team and culture regardless of success? I've also learned from experience, when you buy into this stuff is when you're able to build success. People want to be a part of organizations and teams that stand for something and allow them as individuals to grow. In a team, as in life, you get out of it what you put into it. Both have rewards and consequences. You decide what you're worth it. Will you be a team, or will you be a team in name only? I believe teams are earned, and if you are committed to being a team with heart, I want you to consume the rest of this webinar through the lens of what I call your reality. Think of yourself. How will you implement this? What seems easy on paper is rarely easy in implementation. I know the webinar was advertised as highly interactive. It's advertised that way because when I am working with a team in person, it's highly interactive, and my goal for this is to be highly interactive, and there's limits to what you can do with a webinar. So my encouragement to you is to, everything we do, see it through your lens and think about implementation. Don't just consume it passively like a podcast or an audio book, or just listen to stuff. Really think about how you're going to implement. I am in the world of personal development and self-help and growth, and I know too many people that have become junkies to development without implementation. And so my encouragement to you is your notes should be based on, how do I implement this with my team? So to get started, I want to talk a little bit about the basis of the booklet that we wrote, Teams Are Earned, comes from a Harvard Business Review study that cited 6 things for creating an effective and meaningful team culture. And of course, Harvard Business Review is geared towards businesses, so this this is written to those organizations, and I think there's tremendous play in any team, youth to high school to college to professional, that you might be leading. Number one, people care for, are interested in, and are willing to maintain responsibility for colleagues as friends, or in our case, teammates as friends. Right away, sounds easy. Teammates who are friends, and we all know this is not always the case. And I have talked to countless coaches who will say, my guys or girls don't have to be friends. And again, they don't. But if they are, your team will be more effective. If your aim is more effective, then being friends must be a goal. Now, please note, this doesn't say best friends. It says friends. So how can we create team environments where our teams are friends? And if you're wondering what that means, I think the next 5 follow that in terms of what that means. The second one is people provide support for one another, offering kindness, compassion, and understanding for others and their struggles. You might see what I mean by defining what it means to be a friend. Again, this sounds simple too. And coaching at the junior college and middle school level, I know this is not always the case. Athletes can rag on each other to no end. And I'm here to tell you, do not allow it if you are looking to build a powerful culture. It is not team building to pick on each other. Kindness and compassion might sound corny to some, but they must be a non-negotiable from the players and the coaches. I know too many coaches that use sarcasm with their players, thinking it's all fun and games, and too often this is creating a space where players are afraid to come to coaches with challenges, or players are afraid to come to coaches with ideas, or players are afraid to come to coaches with, quite frankly, anything, because they don't want to be picked on, because they don't want to have to battle the attitude of the coach for that day. And the coach isn't always fully intentional about that attitude, but it's true that they're leaning on the sarcasm or what we perceive as goofing around in lieu of kindness and compassion, which can be less fun perhaps, but really does have to be the go-to when creating an open, honest culture within a team. You can have fun with each other and ensure that kindness is the rule when it comes to your team. The next one is people avoiding blame. People avoid blame, are forgiving, and focused on healing forward. Same as the last point, no pointing the finger, no dwelling on mistakes, move forward. Number 4 is we inspire one another. We inspire one another. I don't think I have to go on and on and on about what that means. Make it a commitment. One thing we say a lot in our workshops and trainings is you matter. And what we mean by that, our reason for sharing that is that you are never a neutral energy in a space. You are either giving or taking from the space. There are a lot of people that think, well, if I'm just not speaking up, if I'm just in the back of the room, if I'm just not adding anything, then I'm neutral. And I truly believe you're either adding or taking. And so make it your mission to inspire one another. This doesn't always have to be the loudest person on the team. We can inspire each other in little moments as well as big moments. Make this a mission, a benchmark of your organization. Number 5, we over communicate the meaningfulness of the work and effort invested in the job or company, as opposed to complaining, snickering, and eye rolling. Obviously, substitute team for job and company. And this one has been surprising to me the more that I have been the outsider working with teams. I'm not the coach when I come in as a facilitator or trainer or even a leadership coach one-on-one with an athlete. I have been surprised by how much athletes will complain about practice, complain about early morning workouts, complain about their busy schedules. And my continued feedback is you signed up for this at any level that you're at. I have middle school players that were complaining that we had practice on a particular day that we don't usually have practice. And again, you signed up for this. And I'm not saying there's no room for venting or being tired. But I do believe that tired and busy has become the new dean's list. What I mean by that is it's a certain sense of pride that we portray if you can complain about how tired and overworked you are as a student athlete. I think that's not to get too big with this, but I think it's reflective of our society as a whole, what we put out there on social media, that if I'm working constantly, if I'm exhausted, if I'm putting in the grind, then that's deserving of the pat on the back. And I think what we have communicated with this is what we've taught with this, rather. We've taught our athletes that yes, they're going to put in the work, but they also have a right to complain about putting in the work. And I think nipping the complaining is more than just making it a rule that we don't complain, but it's over communicating the goal of the team, over communicating the expectations of the team, and agreeing to go after those expectations together. There's room for venting. There's room for feedback. There's room for a player speaking up about something they don't like, but there's not room for simply complaining. And speaking up about something is productive if the goals and the expectations of the team are over communicated. Complaining is not productive, especially when those goals are over communicated. And the last one, teams that are effective, we treat one another with respect, gratitude, trust, and integrity. This is another one that for me doesn't need much of an explanation. And I encourage you, everything we talk about from here on out is drawn from these 6 principles. And I encourage you to ask yourself, when you are looking at your team culture, when you're putting together your practice plan, when you're putting together your plan for the year, are all of these a part of your intentions with the team? There we go. So if we agree, sorry, I had a second there of finding my cursor. If we agree on these principles, my question is, how do we create a team with heart? Step 1, we set the culture. You must set the culture from day 1. We just talked about expectations and over communicating. Step 1 for team culture for us is setting that culture. Start with what you want to be known for. What do we represent? What does being on this team mean? What does it mean to be a Murray Fighting Frog? That's our mascot. What does it mean to be a member of Club Team X or such and such volleyball team? Or when you walk into a room, you're wearing the logo of the team you represent. Do people see it and say, I know exactly the kind of person that is because of what that logo means? It carries a weight of excellence, of integrity. Have you intentionally set standards for your team that represent the expectations that you have, where you want to go? Or is it an anything goes as long as you get the job done kind of standard? When a group lives by a certain set of standards, when we eat, sleep, and breathe our one word or one phrase, we've established a culture. This is who we are. This is what we represent. And the great thing about setting a culture is if you fit that culture as an individual, then and you're willing to support and represent that culture, then awesome. Welcome to the team. If not, we are also clear on what we do not tolerate. We do not tolerate going through the motions. We do not tolerate gossip. We do not tolerate complaining, poor body language, etc. Whatever it is for you. And when you establish what you do not tolerate, you are establishing that if we do not fit you, then perhaps there is a better place to celebrate your gifts. It does not mean you are bad. It means that if you cannot embrace the mindset of this team, we are over communicating what that mindset is, then this team is not going to work for you. If you don't embrace the culture, there's a good chance you are going to feel out of place. And maybe many of us can put ourselves in a position before where we have felt out of place somewhere simply because we do not fit the culture of that somewhere, of that place. Again, you're not bad, but you will feel disconnected because your team, when we talk about how we define team to start this webinar, I defined it that way because I believe team is not designed to make you comfortable. A team is designed to take an individual to a new level of success and performance. And that's done as a unit. We leave no one behind. And you need to be committed to the process of getting there. A team is not there to drag you along simply because you are part of the group. A team is not there to protect your ego. A team is not there to, a team is there to protect the team culture, not an individual's ego, protect the team culture. And if an individual challenges that culture must be defended by the members of the team. It is your faith. As a team, sit back and say, we don't tolerate anyone or anything that gets in the way of what we represent. That's a part of what we don't tolerate. When I think of this idea for me was inspired by reading books and watching Coach K over the years. And just this past few months, I was watching the ESPN Plus series on Duke basketball called Earn Everything, I think it was. And it is clear in that series, if you haven't watched it yet, if you're a coach of any kind, I encourage you to watch that. You can get a free a trial run of ESPN Plus and watch the whole series in a month, or it's $5 a month. It is worth it just to watch this series if you are a coach or a player of any sport. And it is clear to me that Duke basketball has a culture that means something to anyone who comes in contact with it. Now, a Duke basketball has such a exposure worldwide that certainly many people know what it means. But even if it didn't, the exposure regardless, Coach K has been very intentional about what his culture represents. It is a religion to those individuals, and they represent it, and they do not tolerate those that challenge what it represents. That is what we mean by setting the culture from day one. Establish, what do you represent? Keep it to one word or one phrase. We're all familiar with this idea on our shooting shirts or in our locker room, but let's be intentional about it. Don't just pick a word of the year. Be intentional that that word or phrase represents who you are as a team, what you're looking to create, and establish what are your non-negotiables, what do you not tolerate in support of that one word. Step 2 is, after we've done this, we've established our word, what we represent, and what we do not tolerate, then we must establish what are our core values. Keep them simple, make them relevant to you and your team, not canned one-size-fits-all motivational phrases, not the book of the month. Make these core values relevant to your team and live them at a level 10. Too often, I see teams that have the right core values, but not everybody a part of the organization is living these core values at a level 10. So when I walk into coaches' offices and I see these on the walls, that becomes my first question. Are people living these, or are people just kind of going through the motions of these? When these are spoken, I'll see on the wall what their core values are, and then I'll often, when I get with the team, I'll bring those up, and you can tell if they're lived by the reaction of the team. And you might know what I mean. If I bring them up and the team defends them, if the team talks about them, if the team knows what they stand for, then those are core values that are lived at a level 10. If I bring them up and the team rolls their eyes, or the team laughs about it, or the team looks at each other as if, can we trust this guy enough to make fun of coach's core values, then they aren't lived. And unfortunately, in my experience of working with over 50 organizations a year, be it athletic or corporate or academic, more often than not, it's the latter. When you bring up core values, the employees, the teammates, the whomever roll their eyes at it, because so many of us put the core values on the wall but don't live them. So our goal as an organization is to practice what we preach and live them. And I think it might be helpful for you to understand what are our core values in practicing what we preach. The 5 core values of the Pinot Training Group are: number 1, play all your cards; number 2, be desperate, do warrior stuff; number 3, cherish the process; number 4, get what you need; and number 5, do what you say you will do, or don't say it. And I'm going to walk through each of these on the idea of living it, of kind of, again, these are relevant to us, going back to what they should be. They're simple, they're relevant to us, and I want to talk about how we live them at a level 10. I'm literally going to read the descriptions of these and share a little bit about what they mean. So play all your cards. We share that to say, be fully transparent, be honest and upfront. This is what ensures trust and openness. If something's on your mind, the only way we can move forward is if you feel like you've been 100% heard and understood. Speak and listen from a place of humility, service, and growth. Do not hold on to that last ounce you may be frustrated with. Get it out of you, show all your cards. That's what it means to us. And in any conversation, we know we can bring that up. If we sense a teammate holding back, it's play all your cards. You know you can do that without judgment. You know you can do that with 100% support. We want members of our team to be heard. Be desperate, do warrior stuff. This is so much more than just the idea of work hard. Everyone wants to be a warrior until it comes to doing the warrior kind of stuff. When I was in college, our team loved the Ronnie Coleman, I think it was Ronnie Coleman, the bodybuilder, who said, everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift the heavy weights. Be willing to lift the heavy weights. Do the work. Face the challenge. We say, be a desperate warrior that will throw yourself into battle. And that comes from Ryan, who I've mentioned already, is a big fan of the movie The 13 Assassins from 2010. And in this movie, there is a line that says, he who values his life dies a dog's death. And please know we value life. And this might sound overly intense, but what this means to us is don't value your ego. Don't value your pride. Don't value your grudges, your insecurities, your mistakes. Don't act with reservation. Get out of your head and lose yourself in the goal. We talk about culture of heart. For us, that heart acronym, that heart idea is get out of your head, come from your heart. Throw your whole self into the process and be prepared to get scratched and beat up along the way a little bit, but be willing to do whatever it takes. It's not about doing your best. My other TEDx talk, my first one I did, was this idea of why you shouldn't do your best. Because so many of us, when we're saying I'll do my best, we're giving ourselves an out. We're saying I'll do the best effort that I'm capable of, knowing that if I don't get the job done, hey, I said I would do my best. I didn't say I would get the job done. Instead of saying do whatever it takes to get the job done. That's one of our core values. Next, cherish the process. In sports, we're familiar with the idea of trust the process. And recently, again, working with a lot of athletes, we have come to embrace the idea of don't just trust it, but love the process. Embrace the process. Results are never immediate. We talk about the overnight success that took 10 years to get there. I think what's less talked about is the overnight failure that took 10 years to get there. And every day is a choice. Every day sets us up for tomorrow. The little things matter. Do the little things. Do the boring things. When you get tired of doing the boring things over and over and over, when you get impatient because the results are overnight, do not get distracted. Stay the course. Trust and love and cherish the process. The big chances are rare. And so many athletes I work with, it's this sense of I'll play my best or I'll give everything I have when the big game comes around, when we're playing the rivalry team, when it's states, when it's our conference championship, when it's the big tournament where the coaches are watching. And if you're constantly waiting for the big moment's never going to come your way. You must embrace the little moments. The grind is not glorious is a phrase we use a lot, and I know people are shying away from the word grind. And I've seen the definition out there on social media that to grind is literally to rub something down to its stump, to its bare bones. And I understand why we might want to shy away from the word grind, but there are some things, in my opinion, that are just a grind. To get what you want, you sometimes have to do what you don't want to do. And so there is no better word for it. Don't grind 24/7, 365, but embrace the grind when it's necessary. Forget about the glory. Don't complain. And this is in here, so it's probably why I say it a lot. You signed up for this. When you embrace the reality, you signed up for this. You cherish the process. You got to love practice. You got to love the extra hours. You got to love what you put into it. That's a core value of ours. Next one is get what you need. This is a fun one. It's talk about personal responsibility. This one says, do you have what it takes to be successful? If your answer is yes, I trust you to do what you need to do to get the job done. If the answer is no, what do we need to do to provide, to solve, so that you have the tools, resources, training, whatever it might be, to get the job done? Share what you need. We'll figure out what we need to do to make it happen. We as an organization are here to solve problems. That's part of what we represent. And so with that being said, let's make sure we have everything we need to solve those problems. Now, in regards to an athletic team, I think this is a rarely thought of one from the coaching staff, of looking at players and saying, I want you to feel open to be able to say, I've got what I need. I had a player just last week on my middle school team who's a good player, and we're playing a simple pass and catch drill, just standing on the line, passing and catching. These are middle school kids who some of them are brand new to the sport, and so we've got to spend a good amount of time on the fundamentals. And this one particular player keeps dropping the ball, and so I called him over and I said, "Hey, what's going on today? Like, you seem like you're dropping a lot of passes." And he said to me, "My stick's broke." And this is a good 10 minutes into this drill. And I said, well, why didn't you say something? And he just gave me that middle school blank stare back with no answer. And so I tied up his stick. It was a simple fix the stringing, and he got back at it. And as he went back into the drill, it occurred to me that we as coaches, I'm speaking for myself and the coaches I interact with, not projecting on any of you out there, but I believe we as coaches have grown so tired of particularly young lacrosse players blaming their equipment for poor play. Already in the last 3 weeks, I've had plenty of players coming up to me saying their arm guards are too tight, or their stick is this, or their helmet's that. And when you take a look at it, it's really, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just uncomfortable, as all lacrosse equipment is when you first start playing. And so and sticks are tough to use if you've never played with them before. And so we've created an environment where we want our players to solve their own problems. And what that has also created is an environment where this particular player didn't feel comfortable enough to come to me as a coach to say, my stick is genuinely broken. And so my mission is to find the nuance to this. A core value of mine in our company is get what you need. And I was not implementing that in my own lacrosse team. And so moving into next week and the weeks after, and this entire season, I want players to be able to come to me with what they need to perform. I think that's a fantastic core value. We're asking you to perform at your highest level. Let's make sure you feel comfortable to be able to ask for what you need. And the last one is do what you say you will do, or don't say it. I think enough said about that. That's pretty simple. We have too many people that talk the talk but don't walk the walk. Do what you say you will do, or don't say it. These above 5, I share the descriptions we have of them, maybe to inspire you and some of the core values that you have with your team, but also to be able to say, we know exactly what these mean. We have over communicated what these mean. We understand how these play out in the work that we do. And I encourage you to do the same when you are coming up with kind of your core values as a team that, again, back up what you represent and what you don't tolerate. How can you ensure, going back to that live at a level 10 kind of idea, in order to live them, they have to be relevant, they have to be simple, and you have to be able to know what each of them means. These 5 have kept us as a group focused, progressing as a team. They're quick, they're easy to remember. When you say them, you feel them. There's a sense that they're more than words on a poster, and we live them. When we share these with groups we've worked with, they acknowledge that we live them. And that, I would hope for your team, when you share your core values, do people acknowledge that absolutely you're a team that lives those, or do they roll their eyes at it as, okay, you went through the webinar and you created core values, but you aren't really living them? So pick 3 to 5 core values based on what you represent, what you do not tolerate, share them, talk about them. When you talk about them with energy. Don't just share them blankly. Share them in a way that gets your players inspired by them, gets parents inspired by them if they're a part of your team culture. And I encourage them to be, and so that people really start to live this way and identify what it looks like to live them at a level 10. Identify what it looks like when you live them at a level 5, good enough level. Identify what it looks like when you're not living them at all, so that you can come back to these core values of, this is what we represent, this is who we are. We don't tolerate people that don't live these core values. Step 3, if again, step 1, we're setting the culture of what we represent and what we do not tolerate. Step 2 is really establishing these core values that represent those. And to be clear, the culture is that one word on the back of the shooting shirt. The core values might be the poster in your locker room that backs up that culture. And then step 3 is a little bit more I would say less tangible, but it is right out of team development textbooks. And I want you to understand this reality of see it, plan it, believe it, do it, so that you can start to see this play out when you are implementing this team culture. See it. What is the vision of your team? What are the day-to-day behaviors and standards? What does it look like to live at this level? You're establishing your one word. Now, what does that one word look like? What does it mean? What is the why of your culture? What is this culture, if you have a legacy, what has this culture done for your organization in the past, and where do you believe it'll take you in the future? Going back to Coach K, in that Earn Everything series on ESPN Plus, he talks a great deal about how the way our culture is, this is what it's done for us in the past. Certainly they had championships, but there's so much more of that, from graduation rates to what players are doing outside of basketball, to how many players are still connected to that organization. There's so much of, here's the vision of what this culture did for us in the past that really gets new players to buy in. And you say what it's doing for us in the future that gets new players to not only buy in, but want to be a part of what you're building. When you know your why, it adds to all the decisions you make. When you look at hard decisions, you can come back to these core values that you've seen because you know where they're taking you. It gives you the edge in competition to be able to say, we understand who we are, what we represent, what it means. See all of this. Share stories of moments that the culture that you have created has made the difference from a stumble to a success. Share pain of individuals who didn't embrace the culture. There's stories of individuals that I played on a team growing up where that was shared. Here's a story of an individual that great player, but didn't embrace our culture. And this is what it did to our culture and did to that individual and the harm it caused. And not some grand, awful story, but just simply, again, if the fit isn't there, then share that story so the players get a sense of what they're going for and what they're avoiding if they really want to be a part of that culture. And what's the vision of the culture that you are creating? There's intention behind it. We've talked a lot about get the words off of the poster and make it be lived. Really see and envision what that looks like. Once you see it, plan it. Your culture needs to be taught, communicated, and over-communicated. Going back to that Harvard Business Review, over-communicated. Your team members need to know what the culture looks like, feels like, how you act on it. Again, as I said earlier, if you can see what looks like living at a level 10, then plan that out. This is what it's going to look like to live our culture at a level 10. This is what it looks like if you don't. And anyone living at a level 4 is no longer on the team. That's part of planning it, to be able to say, here's the expectation. And if you can't meet the expectation, then maybe this team isn't a fit for you. I said that earlier, and this is how you implement it, because you plan out and over communicate with your players. This is what we're creating. This is what happens if you're not on board with that. Constant communication is necessary with this planning period, and be prepared to adapt. Find aspects that work better than others. For me at Murray, one of our core values, our only core value to start, was effort. We want to see effort, coachability, attitude, and that's what I focused on. And now, after my experience last week, I also want to create openness and willingness to take risks and willingness to make mistakes, because obviously, if one player didn't feel comfortable to come to me with a broken stick, then what are other players not feeling comfortable to come to me with? So adapt your culture as you go, as you plan it, so that again, it works for you. Talk about how you're going to introduce it to others. How do your players talk about this culture to their friends, to their parents, to people on other teams? How do we talk about it, and how do we live it, and how do we hold each other accountable to it? How are we holding each teammate accountable to these things that we set up for ourselves? How do we measure it? How do we give and receive feedback on it? You cannot just set a vision. You have to then share and plan that vision for how it's going to be implemented. See it, plan it. The next one is believe it. You can have the best equipment in the world. Strength coaches will tell you this. You can have the best equipment in the world, but if team members are not seeing the value in that equipment, they don't know how to use it, they're not going to use it. You can have the most streamlined systems as a business or as a team in an organization, and if team members don't care, the systems won't be used. The same is true of culture. You can write the values on the wall, you can put the mantra on the shooting shirt, but if your team members don't believe that culture applies to them, if they aren't interested or invested in it, if they aren't open to it, again, if they roll their eyes when someone brings up the mantra, well, you know how that's going to work out. There is a real difference between a leader of a team that sets a culture, talks about it, and hopes the team gets on board, and a leader that sets it, talks about it, and then lives it and holds their team to that standard of living it. It isn't always easy. I said there's work in this. Reading this is easy. Writing this down is easy. I get it. See it, plan it, believe it, do it. But to really believe it, to really live it is not easy. What do you do when one of your best players is going through the motions or just mailing it in? What do you do when you have constant individuals on a team whose attitude is sucking the life out of other teams? What do you do when you establish that you don't tolerate poor body language, and poor body language is pervasive? And the answer is, if you really believe in that what you're doing and what you represent and what you don't tolerate, then you simply don't tolerate it. I get that conversation all the time from coaches and players. You know, players will say, we decided we don't tolerate gossip. How do we stop it? And I said, you stop it. When someone starts to complain or gossip behind someone's back, you say, hey, we don't do that here. And can you imagine how uncomfortable that's going to make the person who's complaining? Like, it's going to shut them down, and maybe it'll make you uncomfortable to take that sort of stand, but that's where the believe it piece comes. If you believe your culture, then you do stand in that. And that individual, if maybe they'll be shocked by that conviction, and they'll be inspired to not do that again, to not gossip again, to not complain about the coach again. Or maybe they'll be annoyed by that, and that's not where they want to be, and then let them go find another place to be. If you are a team that believes in no gossip and no complaining, and you've got an individual that doesn't also believe that and can't get on board with that, then allow them to find another place to be. Believe it is a huge part of creating this culture that holds individuals to a higher standard. This is when you talk about this is how we do things here standard. Consistency is huge in creating a this is how we do things here standard, so much so that it becomes an automatic habit. It becomes a response. It becomes something that pulls you in the right direction, and 90% of your choices as a member of this team are dictated by the values and the culture you've set and invested in. Again, going back to this effort idea that is a core value on our middle school team, I have one player who was mailing it in on Monday, and I pulled him aside, and all I said, I pull him aside, and you can imagine the middle school kid thinks he's in trouble, is apologizing about something he doesn't even know what he did. And I said, hey, I go, you're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. I want to tell you what I need from you. What I need from you is effort, because you know that that's how we operate here. Understood? And he looked at me almost with a sense of relief that that's all that it was. I wasn't putting him on the line. I wasn't reaming him out. I wasn't calling out, nitpicking anything. I was simply saying, I'm going to tell you what I need from you. What I need from you is effort, because you know this is how we operate here. Do you understand? And he said, yes, sir. And then he got back out there and he gave effort for the rest of practice. Now, I will add the caveat, he gave effort while I or other coaches were watching. And I do know that when we weren't watching, he wasn't always giving that 100% effort. When we turned and saw him, he kicked it into gear. That tells me he knows what the expectation is from us, but we also need to find a way to sustain this culture so that that player lives it, even when we as coaches are not watching. And that's why the next couple parts of this webinar series are about sustaining that culture. It's one thing to create it, it's another thing to sustain it so that the players believe it even when you're not there. The last piece is do it. And I think this is self-explanatory, and we've certainly talked about it in regards to the believe it side of things. But do it, I just want to re-emphasize, comes back to the cherishing the process side of things. It's going to get hard. It's going to get tedious. It's going to get, there are certainly days you look over, you see the player dogging it, and part of you wants to let it go, because calling it out is going to be hard work, and you cannot let it go. This is, as a coach, embracing the process of cherishing the process of implementing this culture, and trusting that each day you do that work, it is improving that team, it is improving those individuals, so much so that the individuals will fall in love with the routine, fall in love with the repetitive. It's not easy to do these things. I grew up in Syracuse, New York, as I said, and West Genesee lacrosse has a tremendous culture set by Coach Masser for years and years and years. I know he's retiring or retired now for this season, and we know what they did. Though that team committed to the basics, and they committed to the fundamentals, and they did the same things year in and year out, year in and year out, year in and year out, and that coach never let anything slide. Those players were in line. They all had, their socks were high. They were very militant in how they showed up, and you look at that and say, we can see that, we can plan that, and I think a lot of people believe it, that it works, but not a lot of people do it. Not a lot of people follow through with that. Not, it's the everybody wants to be a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift the heavy weights. Everybody wants to be a state champion, but nobody wants to lift the heavy weights. The do it piece is the lifting the heavy weights and falling in love with the process of lifting the heavy weights. So it's not a constant grind. It's falling in love with it. Take action and do it. See it, plan it, believe it, do it. It is not just a mantra. It for us is how we live life. It's how we operate our team trainings. How is this month going to go? See it, plan it, believe it, do it. How's this week going to go? See it, plan it, believe it, do it. How is this practice going to go? See it, plan it, believe it, do it. Don't just write out a practice plan. See it, plan it, believe it, do it. This is how you get teams 100% invested to take massive, decisive action in terms of what you are looking to create and make happen. So to recap, number one, we set the culture. What do we represent? What do we not tolerate? Number two, what are your core values that back up that culture? As a team, 3 to 5, not a ton. What are your core values? And number three, see it, plan it, believe it, do it. See the vision, believe that vision, fully invest in it, and take massive action on what that vision is. Once you do this, you'll be faced with coaching. And I want to say this very quickly. I know we're approaching the end of the webinar, but when you start to coach in this way, again, we'll talk about maintaining and sustaining this culture in the next couple of webinars, but when you coach in this way, you are going to coach players up or out. And that's just the way it is, whether you're a club team, a middle school team, a high school team, or a college team. Some people will not want to engage with your standard. Some parents will not want to engage with your standard. They don't want to invest in it. They don't agree with it. And that's okay. That's why the belief piece is so important. That's why overthinking it is so important. That's why really understanding what you stand for is so important. Because if they're not on board, there is a better team out there for them. That is not calling them bad. That's not saying you cut the sandbags. It's saying there's a better team out there for them. If you believe in your culture, let them thrive elsewhere. Again, using Coach K as an example, I have to imagine there are players out there that think they want to play for Duke, but in reality, they don't want to live the Duke culture. They don't want to do the work that's necessary to play for Duke. They want the reward, but they don't want the work that goes along with it. And those players will not thrive in a Duke environment. You have to live it. When you live it, you're creating an openness of trust. Your players trust you when you're consistent. You trust people that are consistent. Trust equals teamwork. You're more open to people you trust. People are invested in you. When you trust your parents, when your parents trust you, when your players trust you, that's when you grow as a culture. That's when you're able to take risks. That's when you're able to make mistakes with your culture. You're able to get on a player who's dropping the ball without realizing his stick's broke, because those individuals trust that you have their best interest in mind. I know this is asking a lot of you as a coach to really implement this stuff. I know it because I'm doing it myself, and I work with tons of coaches every single year. And so I leave you with this quote. It's by Coach John Cook, who's the head volleyball coach at Nebraska. He's a 4-time national champion coach, and he has a tremendous book that I encourage you to check out. And I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but just type in Coach John Cook. And in this book, he says, I ask a lot of my players. I'll ask a lot of them because I know at some point life is going to ask something much more of them or of someone they love. Sports, people say it builds character. Sports is a reflection of life. And I think sports can be if we ask a lot of our players, if we ask a lot of the people that are a part of our culture, if we ask a lot of our coaches, and we set a high standard that is reachable, that people can fully invest in, that makes people grow, that helps people grow, that pulls them to a better version of themselves. Ask a lot of each other, ask a lot of yourselves. It'll be more rewarding and fulfilling when you do. Creating a positive team culture must be intentional. So do it with intention and seek to ask more from the people around you. Our next webinar next week is Energy is Everything, the extraordinary impact of how you show up. This is about how coaches show up, how players show up. It really is about let's get in, and we've created the culture. Now, how do you show up to sustain that culture and impact the people around you? As I said at the beginning of this, all this is based off of our booklets, our posters, our articles that we've written. If you'd like any of these posters, copies of these booklets, we do not. Our business is our trainings. This is a free webinar with US Lacrosse. This stuff is free to you. We're not going to put you in some newsletter reel. If you say yes to some of this, we want to give away our stuff. We want to encourage teams to embrace culture, to embrace, as TJ said, the psychosocial aspects of sports, because they're not organic. We have to be intentional about them, and they're why so many of us get into sports in the first place. If you want to keep in touch with me, again, shoot me an email and I can send you some of that stuff. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Twitter. Specifically on Instagram and Twitter, I'm doing an intentional job this year of putting out more content like this and also short snippets of it. So please reach out and keep in touch in that way. So at that rate, I think I throw it back to you, TJ, if there are any questions that came through or anything like that.
Yeah, that was fantastic, Bobby. Thank you so much. I was excited just because we were going to be able to provide this as the national governing body to the lacrosse community. And now I am uber motivated to take some of this. And, even though I'll be working with a Tigers, which is, 8, 9, 10-year-old-ish girls this season, I can already see that there's applications for when we get to our first practice and starting to set some of these things, even with youngsters of that age, to make sure that we have the right environment for all of those young ladies to succeed. We did receive a few questions that came in. So if you're okay with it, Bobby, and you're all right on time, I know we're right at 9 o'clock. I would love to throw those your way and give you some time to respond to those. We certainly understand if you have other time commitments for our guests that are on this evening and you need to hop off. So as a reminder, there is a recording of this that'll be delivered. So if you need to jump, please do. But I think Bobby's energy and passion in the live is 100 times better than what you'll get out of a recording. So if you can hang out, great. But if not, we certainly understand. And Bobby, if you could just leave that slide up there while you're answering questions. So if anybody wants to take down your contact info,
sure,
they can do that as we're going here.
Okay.
So
yeah, and I've got time. It's my I'm the one who went right up to 9. I went off my planned script, which is typical. So I'm happy to take questions.
No worries. We're in bonus time here
Yeah.
for sure. So a couple of questions that came in, right? And I'll start with with something that actually came up in my head, and then we'll get to a couple of the guests that I think you might want to that popped up and could be probably lingering in some other folks' minds as well. So when you talked about your the values and setting those and establishing them for the team, and some players rolled their eyes because coach has their values on the wall and so on and so forth, right? How much of the development of those values should be team driven versus coach driven?
That's a great question, and I think my answer is a little bit of both. I think they should definitely be team driven in the creation of them. So for example, when I set up values with my middle school team, or even in the beginning of a training that we do, we set up a list of commitments that we are going to make with each other, and I let the team start the process. I let the team kind of get going what they're interested in making happen, and then as a coach or facilitator, I also have certain things that I certainly want to be a part of it. And that's where the over communicate and the why comes from, of if I'm sharing, you as a coach are a part of that process as well. And so inherently you're going to be able to add your 2 cents of what you want a part of it. But it's kind of the idea that people will support what they create. I think that's so true for athletes too. Athletes are used to coaches coming down on them with this is how we do things instead of asking for their input. And in my experience, TJ, more often than not, teams are aware of what the challenges are. So I worked with a gymnastics team this past year, and the coaches said to me before our time together that the players are a bunch of individuals and they need them to come together as a team. And gymnastics lends itself to that. It's an individual sport until you get to the collegiate level where it's a team sport. And so we get to the conversation of what are your core values, and the team, or what's your one word? And the team said our one word is unity. And that was before the coaches even spoke up. And so the coaches didn't have to add their 2 cents that it came from them, because the players came up with it on their own. So that's the hybrid of it. I would do it with the players and the coach. It's all one unit. There's no distinction there. And the coach can add what they want to add. And if the coach is adding something that the players don't understand or agree with, if a coach, I worked with the volleyball team, that's where the gossiping kind of story came from. A coach wanted to add no complaining or gossiping, and the player's response was, well, how do we make sure we do that? And now the coach gets to address the real problem at hand. It's not that players want gossiping to occur, it's that they don't know how to stop it. And so it's having that conversation. If a coach is going to add something, read the energy. If you can tell the players are just going along with it because they don't want to challenge you, then call that out and make sure that the players are on board with it. If you are a coach, are the one who's coming up with the core value.
That's fantastic, Bobby. Makes a ton of sense. Thank you. So Bob has asked us, if I run a club program of 30 tournament type teams, what do you believe is the #1 value for teams to adopt?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I don't know if I have a quick, easy answer. I think, you've got to it comes back to that idea of, there's a team up in upstate New York that I know of, like a club program team, whose name is Integrity First. That's their name, and what that means is that is their #1 core value. No matter what team you are, no matter what age, integrity is #1. That's what they're preaching and teaching. They don't even advertise we'll get you recruited or we'll win games. It's we will teach integrity, and it's a core value of the individual who started the program. So I think that can be, if it's a team of 30, it can kind of come down to whatever your goal and mission is. There are certainly teams out there whose goal or mission is to win as many games as possible, and I'm not here to judge that. There's teams out there whose mission is to raise character and leadership development in individuals. And so I think it comes down to what is it? It's got to be, Bob, it has to be something that can be lived by every single team, so that it's transferable in that way, like Integrity First is. So for me, going back to that believe it thing, I don't have an answer for you as to what that is, but it's got to be something that means something to you. For me, effort is always a #1 thing, and so effort's the core value of my team right now. And if I had a club of 30, I might be encouraged to make effort that core value of, I'm not looking for your skill, I'm looking for, are you giving everything you got? And that's personal to me, because I was never the most skilled player on the field. I would win the Mr. Hustle award. So it's based in my experience, and so that would be my answer, is to find something that if it's going to be, you're going to have 30 teams of parents and players that want to know why this is our word we live by, you've got to be able to stand behind it and believe it.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so Ashlyn from Baldwinsville, and just to point out, 2000 New York State champs, go Liverpool, Central New York represent, she says.
Yeah.
So she says, these examples are awesome, so helpful. Please keep them coming. When you say you want to let it go, i.e. the kid phoning it in, but you don't, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's very relevant. That to me, TJ, you and I have known each other for probably the past year or 2 years, and we've had a lot of conversations about this athlete development model and implementing this stuff. And that's a big reason I'm now coaching middle school, is because I think there's so much you can learn from being in the field. A year ago, I'd sit here and do a webinar and say, don't allow phoning it in. And now that I'm out there coaching, I realize there's days where it's like, oh God, like, do I got to call this out again? And the reality is, you just can't let it go. I think there's this one particular player who I'm referring to. I don't think he liked me for the first week of practice. He was definitely annoyed by me. He definitely thought I was constantly on top of him. I am a very lighthearted individual by nature. I've continually made the point that I like him as an individual. I love him as an individual. A lot of us shy away from that love word. I'm never mad at him. He's never doing anything wrong. Here's what I need from you is effort. Let's make sure we're always bringing that. I over communicate. For me, effort means you're running 100% of the time that we're on the field. If we're going from drill to drill, we're running. Your stick is in the box when we're in and we're listening to coaches talk. Your eyes are on me. We over communicate what it means, to the point where we're in our third, fourth week of practice, and that's why I'm able to just say, you know what I need from you. And last thing I'll say on this too, to Ashton's question, is I think a lot of times when I was working at HCC with that team, I did have a moment where I got really frustrated with a player and upset with him and let my emotions out. And I put myself in his shoes, and I realized, I said to him, I go, do you think I don't like you? And he said, well, yeah, right now I do. And I said, why? He goes, well, you're mad at me. I go, I'm mad at you because of what you did. But I love you as an individual. I don't not like you. I'm going to like you tomorrow. I'm going to like you the next day. When you leave here, I will give you a reference for any team you want to go play for. I think you've got a great work ethic. I wouldn't be talking to you if I didn't. And so it's over communicating that care, so that when you're coming down on them constantly, that they know it's not just to nitpick them. And the other thing I'll say on that is, if you've got a lot of players that are doing it, you bring it back in. I brought my team in several times the first week of practice. Let's have a knee again. Let's talk about what we expect. Let's go back. And at some level, they want play to continue. They want practice to go. They're going to get away with whatever they can get away with. If you don't let them get away with it, they'll learn not to get away with it. It's not easy. It can be annoying. My practices are only an hour. It can definitely eat up some time. And it's just something I've decided I'm gonna live, and I'm gonna make happen.
Awesome, thank you. All right, and let's see. So the next one is, you talked a little bit about, the coach them up and or coach them out kind of, strategy, if you will. So when it comes to the accountability of upholding the culture, I don't know if it's a ratio or what we want to call it, but how much of that falls on the coach, or how much do we put on captains, or how much do we put on the team? I think of an example myself that an NCAA championship athlete had told me. We were having a conversation about some things that went on and guys that were on their team, and he was telling me about a player who showed up pre-game on Cinco de Mayo and had started their celebration festivities just a little bit early. And, the coaches went out to the field to do the pregame with the officials and all that good stuff. And the team decided that, hey, you know what? You're not a part of us anymore. You're not taking this seriously. You're abusing, drugs, alcohol, things like that. And we've got a game today, and you're showing up in this condition. We're not here to let that happen. We're not going to tolerate it. The game's not starting until you take your equipment off and go outside the fence. And, literally they walked out about 35 seconds before the national anthem started, and security had escorted their teammate off the premises. So great, a fantastic example of the team upholding the beliefs and the culture that they've established. Now, that was at the college level. So when we're talking, high school and, below level athletes, again, how much of that falls between coaches, captains, and or the team?
Yeah, and I like that you pointed out at the end there that it's at the college level, because the other note I was going to make is, you said it's a national championship program. So that's I would assume a culture that has been built over time, that Duke basketball kind of culture where even the players are coming to be a part of it. And so they will defend it like it's their religion. I worked with a college soccer team this past year, and the players wanted to establish a no drinking rule for the entire season. Obviously, that was inspired by something, and so they really thought if we live this for the whole season, that's going to make a big difference for us. And it never happened, because my what I said to them is, I go, don't say you're going to do this knowing you're not, because that strips a lot away from the team. Don't say you're going to do it knowing that people are going to break it. If you're going to make this a commitment, make sure you live it so that it's positive and not negative. And ultimately, the team decided not to do it because there's a handful of them that were straight up, we're not going to live this. And this is a coach in his third year, and he didn't bring it up. His team did. But I believe over time, if he keeps recruiting the players that fit his belief and his culture, he'll find a team that embraces, whether it's no drinking, something like that, a team that's willing to do what you just said, hold such a standard that they decide the player isn't there. I think there's a nuance to it at the youth level that has to be very important, understanding the development of kids and decision making that they're able to make, understanding that certainly at some level, we have a player on our team this year that has a terrible attitude, and this is my first year with the team. I wanted to cut him because of his attitude, and the head coach for the varsity team said, this is a guy absolutely who has a bad attitude, but he's a guy that will really benefit from being a part of this team, and he's not going to get that growth if he's not a part of this team. He knows his family situation, he knows his social scene, so we want him to be a part of the team. There's a guy where if halfway through the season my middle school captains wanted to coach him out because he's not on board, I wouldn't over explain and over communicate my why for keeping him, but I would over explain that we're committed to this individual's growth and development. So at the youth level, you've got to kind of take stock in what is your role. When I was at Hartford Community College, we saw ourselves as many guys' second chance, and being their second chance, we might give them more chances than a top four-year school Division I program might, because we are seeing ourselves in developing that individual. So I think it all depends on where you're at the youth level. I would definitely, the coach wants to be a part of all those decisions if a player is or is not a part of a team.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby. So we have time for one more question, because I certainly want to be respectful of your time. I know you've put in quite a day here with some other speaking engagements in the last couple of hours or days, and coaching and preparing for our session. So I want to have one last question here, and for those that are lacrosse folks, I'm honored, I should say, that we have this person who believes in this part of athlete development so much that she is participating in our webinar this evening. So Fefi Barnhill, who is literally a Hall of Fame living legend in the women's lacrosse game, has been on with us the entire hour. And if you're not sure of who Fefi is, just hop on Google. She's literally done it all. And so Fefi, first, thank you for taking the time, and we really appreciate knowing that it's so important to you that you're willing to spend an hour to help your teams. And so Fefi has asked, how do you change a bad culture to a positive culture? So what I would assume she's looking at is, hey, I came in, I'm taking over a program, or if I'm taking over a program and it's not in such a great place, I gotta get this ship turned in the right direction here. So how do I get going that way?
Yeah, I think the best example I have is the soccer team I just mentioned, where it's at the college level, so I hope that's relevant. But it is a coach is coming in, and he's in his third season now, and certainly it's been recruiting individuals that represent the culture that he is setting. Going back to that See It, Plan It, Believe It, Do It, it's a big part of See It, Plan It, Believe It, in terms of getting those players to understand, the recruited players to understand what vision you're going after, what you're looking to create, and inspiring them to be a part of that vision. That was one of the Harvard Business Review's core principles, is inspiring people to be a part of that vision, and then being relentless with that standard when you are with that team. this particular soccer team did in fact coach one of his best players out, and that was a hard decision to make. Not to make, he didn't make the decision. The player made the decision on her own, but the coach knew it was going to happen. And it's a decision that was made to say, yes, their skill might help us win some games, which is certainly what he was hired to do at the Division I level. But it's not, that player is not helping them live the culture that is going to help them in the long term. It's seeing the vision long term. Another example is a basketball team I've worked with, where the coach has actually been intentional about letting players go. This past season, to TJ's question from before, it was the coach made the decision with the players, so everybody's in on it. It wasn't in a bullying way. It was in a way to say to a player, listen, this is our expectation. We've said it all season, and he's one of their better skilled players. We've said it all season, but you're not meeting it, and so you're not serving this team anymore, and so we're gonna have to let you go. And this particular team, it's a Division III program that lost in the Sweet 16, and that coach knows if some of those players that over the past couple of years have been let go were on it, they might have gone further. And it's the understanding, and it's going back to that believe it principle of standing behind what you represent. When you do that, I think people pay attention. I think coaches pay attention. I think players pay attention, parents pay attention, and people are going to be willing to sign up for your journey. Even if the legacy of the team isn't success, they'll sign up for the journey if you are standing behind it and believing it. And you know, I kind of wish I had an easier answer of changing a negative culture, but the reality is it goes back to it's a lot of hard work and consistency of what you represent, and you might lose some players along the way that are going to sting in the short term. But in my experience of doing this for 8 years, it ends up in the long run, it always works out. It really does. If you're living that culture, in the end of the day, you create something that is worth coaching, something that's worth standing for, something that's worth standing behind and believing in.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, Bob. You know, I think as coaches, I think we often throw around that phrase of addition by subtraction, right? And but
Mhm.
what does that really mean, right? And the addition is, you know, the positivity it brings and the work ethic and the effort and the attitude and all those things we want. And we maybe don't over communicate that like we should per your notes here throughout the presentation. But when we're deliberate about that, I think you're spot on. So, you know, that's great. So thank you so much. With that being said, you know, we are 20 minutes into bonus time here. Certainly appreciate everybody for jumping on this evening. As a reminder, we are hosting another webinar with Bobby next week. You can reach it through the Webinar Wednesdays page on uslacrosse.org to find the registration link. You know, if you saw any value in this whatsoever, and I believe by the engagement that I was looking at here as we were going, I think everybody pulled something away from this. Please share the link with a friend, you know, so that they register and hop on. They don't have to come to the live event. They'll get a recording automatically delivered if there's a conflict in schedules. Share the recording of this one once you get it, because, you know, again, the holistic development of athletes is super important to helping them reach their full potential and long-term success, both in sport and outside of sport. And the more that we can do to help you do that with your athletes, the better. And we certainly want to keep doing that. So with all that being said, thank you again, everyone. Have a great evening. And Bobby, thank you so much from all of our participants this evening and our staff at US Lacrosse. And on behalf of, you know, the however many hundreds or thousands or 10,000s of kids will ultimately benefit from the coaches who hopped on there this evening. You know, they don't even know that their coaches are doing this, but thank you from them as well. We appreciate it, and certainly looking forward to your session next Wednesday night at 8 p.m. So with that
Thank
being said,
you.
good night,
Yeah.
everybody. Bobby, closing words?
No, thank you. I think I'd love for folks to hop. I appreciate everyone here, and love for folks to hop on next week. You know, a lot of these questions too about, you know, changing cultures and getting people to believe it and buy into it comes down to the energy you as an individual create, and that's what we're going to be talking about next week. I think it's a hugely important piece of this culture. We are not teams are not anything but of individuals who are committed to something. So let's talk about how individuals show up.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bobby, and good night, everybody.